On March the 8th, that was International Women's Day, the UN announced 40 weeks to go to COP28. So their countdown is to November 30th to December 12th. And we see this in Bible prophecy that these events of sudden destruction will come as a woman in labor. And we're seeing this countdown from 40 weeks down to the final week of just like a woman that's in labor. In fact, the agenda of this climate deal has this pictures of these women that are pregnant. It's Gaia worship, Mother Earth worship. You see with the COP28 and Laudato Si, the Pope's plan, which is the banner movement for this event.
Right, and can you just explain briefly about the Pope's plan, how that is connected with the climate control?
Yeah. So his is a seven-sector, seven-year covenant that comes before King Charles. So we're in this seven-year agreement, which started in early 2022. I'll elaborate a little bit more in a little bit. And then their icon for this Paris Climate Agreement is the Eiffel Tower. So March 8th is known as the International Women's Day, a day which began by the Socialist Party of America and spread among the socialist countries. This is unbelievable. And the symbol of the Eiffel Tower is their symbol of the Paris Climate Agreement, which is nicknamed La Dame de Fer, which is French for Iron Lady. It's the symbol being used to strengthen the deal at COP28. So the UNFCCC, which is this COP program, is top priority for King Charles. So that was at the 40 weeks to go. We have an update from the UN. 39 weeks to go. The president, Al Jaber, says we have 7 years to go. Unite the world towards an agreement. The clock is ticking. It's like all these people, we have a lot of people today that are Christians who are saying the time that we're at the end, it's the clock is ticking, time's running out. And we've been saying this, I've been saying that I've been saying it since 2015, 2005, that we're getting close. And then 2019, when the elections went crazy, then I was telling people every day, it's like time's running out.
Right,
But these guys are doing the same thing. They're saying the clock is ticking,
but in a
and
different way.
they do it in a different way.
Right, because Mother Earth is about to implode, according to them.
Yep. And one example of what they need to do is the country of Oman wants 79% of electric vehicles on the road by 2035.
Now, I've been seeing other places talking about where by 2030 they want a lot of cars, period, off the road.
Yes, and that's like state of California. You can't even buy can't even buy your gas powered weed eater anymore. You'd have to go to Arizona and buy your gas powered weed eater and pay cash, not letting anybody know that you're from the state of California.
Oh
And
my
the state
goodness.
and Honda, which makes lawnmowers worldwide, that they've pulled out of the U.S. with their production. So as of next year, there's no more Honda mowers being sold in the U.S. So how are people going to mow their lawn? They have to buy a battery powered lawnmower. And
Right.
Honda is not. It just Honda decided just to leave the lawnmower industry altogether. So I don't know who's going to take over.
Interesting. And probably the batteries are made out of lithium, which pollutes the earth. But anyway.
Yep. Yeah, and at 38 weeks ago, the UN calls for a new agenda for peace 2023, and they released the synthesis report of our common agenda.
Yeah, now interesting because I remember reading in the synthesis report how relocation was part of their agenda, relocating people, relocating us to where?
Cities. They want everybody in the cities. And that's been going on, like in China, for example, for years. And then UN states with just 7 years left to achieve the 2030 agenda, we believe the SDGs remain our best chance to spread peace, prosperity, security, and human rights to all corners of the world.
Right. So when they say peace and security, as the Bible predicted.
That's right as the Bible predicted. First Thessalonians 5:3. You have a covenant confirmed in Daniel 9:27.
Right, which again, I want to talk to unbelievers. That was written 2,000 years ago, and then Book of Daniel was written even before that.
And at 37 weeks, the Dr. Al J. Burr once again says we're way off target on our SDGs. And this followed the 7 year bilateral agreement between the UK and Israel ahead of COP. And the vision for this 7 year agreement are partnership, anti Semitism, defense and security, trade and investment, cyber, science, innovation and technology, climate, health, culture, education, and higher education, development, and gender. So we obviously see this gender thing throughout these goals, and the climate movement as well. At 36 weeks to go, Dr. Al Jaber once again says we need to triple energy capacity within the next 7 years. So we're seeing this 7 year thing played out nearly every single week. And King Charles headed to Germany, and he says, together we must strive for security, prosperity, and well being that our people deserve. So this would have happened about April, first part of April. So the UAE and Malta and Switzerland announced 5 pledges to advance a systematic, responsive, and evidence-based approach to climate, peace, and security. So here we see this peace and security once again being played out. And then they state no true security without climate security, essential for international peace and security. So these statements are coming out all the time. And then there's 4 between now and the end of the season. There's 4 regional climate weeks. One's the Africa Climate Week, the Middle East and North Africa Climate Week, the Latin America and Caribbean Climate Week, and Asia Pacific Climate Week. And then their statement says we must reduce emissions by 43% by 2030. So they want to basically half of the world's emissions in the next 7 years.
Right. And again, that's limiting
everything,
travel.
your travel, your gas, your food. It's absolutely everything. So anyways, what they're trying to sell to the world is that prosperity sells. But in reality, this isn't prosperity at all. It's limits to livelihood.
Right. It's only prosperity for the elites.
Yeah, it's prosperity for the elites. 35 weeks. There's another call for peace. The core part of the COP28 is supposed to be on water security. And then $35 trillion is needed for transition to 2030. And then we have news on expropriation of property for property owners in the EU. And so at 35 weeks, the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, called for all people of faith worldwide to join their voices in a common prayer for peace as the holy festivals of Ramadan, Easter, and Passover coincided together.
Now back to the people living in the EU, are they trying to then have them leave where they live?
What they have to do is fix up their properties to a certain extent to save the climate, or the government comes in and take your properties. It says trillions I have a title under trillions under his disposal, and there's investments of 35 trillion needed by 2030 for successful energy transitions. And we can assume who is based on the trillions at his disposal, talked about at COP27 or COP26 in Glasgow.
That King Charles talked about that.
King Charles talked about, and immediately following that, he released a press release stating that would be under his Natural Capital Investment Alliance. So he's talking about himself in the third person. Charting a path to net zero requires both the public and private sector working together to achieve scale and make critical impact across sectors. That was said by King Charles. Most people don't have access to that document, but it was released through his SMI.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because other people were saying when they heard that statement that he had trillions at his disposal, they were like, see, he's talking about someone else, like he's talking about the Antichrist. But now that totally makes sense.
He's talking about himself. And he released that letter to the G7. So the G7 had received that letter, and it was on his. I don't know if it's on his website to date, but it was on there for quite a while. And then we have 7 years until expropriation. EU draft law threatens property owners. The EU is currently working on a draft law that would practically expropriate older residential buildings, and people will lose their permit to occupy those properties by 2030. This is happening in the EU, and that is less than 7 years way to their end date on that. Another statement by the UN is the coming final 7-year covenant is not a climate conflict agenda, but a climate action agenda for peace, climate security, and action. So we're seeing this thing build and build and build every single week.
Right. And again, they keep on saying we have no more time. They say this is it. We have to.
And the time to act is now.
Right.
At 34 weeks, we have a university, Indiana University, has embraced this 7-year deal already. and they're sending the largest delegation of students to COP28 in November and December.
Ooh.
And then the UN states to celebrate what unites us. So what unites us is this climate agenda, and we need to believe the UN. So this is our time. The UN's right about everything. And then we have living in harmony, which is the king's. I call his Kampf, his struggle to get everybody to join his deal. And he wrote a book about that called The Harmony. So we have his whole plan revealed for mankind in the book Harmony.
Right, which again, in that book, Harmony, he talks about that the world cannot handle the population. There's too many people, and the world cannot handle all these people.
Yes, the UN states that we have 33 weeks to go, and then there's 7 years to cut emissions. COP28 must be the most significant event since 2015. This is Paris Climate Agreement. It's time to achieve our goals. And then their statement that King Charles leads the way to COP28. Johnson Controls CEO makes a statement that humanity has 7 years to cut global emissions by half. The next 7 years could change our lives forever. Oh yeah, well, it's called a tribulation.
Right. And also I want to make a comment that if you please watch our other videos that Craig did, because he explains how King Charles is really over the whole climate agenda, from meetings from decades ago.
Yeah, 53 years worth. COP28 will move beyond setting goals to achieving them. So to date, most nations are way, way behind on this. But in several years ago, Israel produced a 429-page document how they will one day implement these goals. And we're coming up to that here at the end of this year. So they're leading the way on this Antichrist agenda, which is, we saw that in 2020 as well. Is Israel leading the way on health and what you should do to your bodies? And then there's a statement, we all need to show up in Dubai with 2030 targets. So everybody needs to come with a 2030 target. That's 7 years away. And heavy industry and mass food production, among other factors, must be cut more than 40% by 2030. This stuff's unbelievable, what they're producing every single week that we're getting these updates. And then Dr. Al Jaber says, we have a small window of opportunity to make a massive course correction and shift gears. And we must act now by delivering across 4 key pillars of climate finance, human capital, policy, and technology. We can guess what the human capital is about. Jaber highlighted the need to strike a balance between passion and realism in order for us to deliver a true, pragmatic, progressive, practical deal at COP28. So we know there's a huge deal being produced at this event. Final negotiations for this event is December 11th through the 12th. So they have to have a deal done by the 12th. The G7 draft vows to work with other developed nations to fully meet the goal by 2023. So that they have a goal in mind at the end of 2023 for 7 years, and it's right there in the G7 draft. I would say at this point we're 99.99999%, basically 100%. It's going to be a 7-year agreement at the end of COP.
Right, at the end of the COP meeting, COP28 meeting in Dubai in December.
Yep. And then there's another statement that says King Charles Sustainable Buildings Task Force is leading the way ahead of COP28. This group of industry leaders have outlined best practices and recommendations to achieve a more sustainable built environment through technology adoption, supported by smart policies and innovative partnerships. So this event called COP means Conference of the Parties. And so there's 70,000 minimum that are people that are going to be at this event. This far exceeds the event in September at the UN General Assembly. 32 weeks ago, the UN states the target is 12-12-23, the 8th anniversary of the Paris Climate Agreement. Now this one gets pretty interesting. The target date, December 12th, 2023, for a 7-year deal with nature, building upon the success of COP15 in Montreal, Canada in 2022, and on the 8th anniversary of the Paris Climate Agreement and the 5th anniversary of the International Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace. So we have 2 anniversaries on December 12th that they're going to celebrate with a covenant. With just 7 years to go, the world is even further off track in its efforts to eliminate hunger by 2030. A scaled up and well-coordinated response is urgently needed. World Bank 4/20/2023 is when they made that statement.
Right. So World Bank is involved also.
And so they signed in on a 7-year benchmark bond following April of 2023. We also have the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, tells us to set a worldwide target for renewable energy by 2030. And we could develop these targets by COP28. So this is their end goal. It is time to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals with just 7 years left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, UN General Assembly. Dr. Al-Jaber was honored to meet King Charles in February, describing him as an inspirational advocate for environmental action towards COP28. So we see him behind the scenes leading the way. The COP28 president looks forward to collaborating with King Charles, his partners, and the whole world to work closely on solutions and the intersection of climate and nature and focus on concrete actions to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius alive. That's the Agenda 2030. Joe Biden, we are already seeing the signs of what is to come. If we don't, more severe droughts, more floods, seas rising, temperatures rising, weather instability, and market unpredictability for 2023. That's his statement. So it's like he just read out of Matthew 24. And we're seeing these things before the tribulation begins, and their statements are collaborating with Matthew 24.
Right. And they're putting out all these like videos. I mean, UN, you see all these videos that are just showing catastrophe all over the world.
Yes, and we can all agree it's being heated up, but it's God pushing the buttons to get these globalists to strengthen this covenant.
Right, right. And I mean,
it's judgment coming.
Yeah, I absolutely. But I also do believe in weather manipulation, but I'm not going to go into a whole long thing with that.
That's obvious as well,
right?
But probably more localized rather than universal. At 31 weeks ago, I'll show you the picture just for you. So this is the picture they had for COP28 Paris climate that they took down. So at 31 weeks, we have the Terra Carta Accelerator that was on May 5th. That was announced that there's 5 principles to live by on land and 5 principles to live by on water use in the next 7 years. And there's 10 mandates or 10 principles per year that are going to be added by King Charles in the next 7 years.
Right, and the mandates are not only going to be about water, but different areas.
So we have that declaration, and then we have the plot thickens at the UN General Assembly to strengthen the goals ahead of COP28. And Britain is about to take over the world affairs, and we are called to deliver the SDGs at halftime. So we're at the halftime right now. And so they're trying to strengthen these goals ahead of COP28. And it says, today we seek to promote a British policy and priority, which is above party politics. So this puts King Charles at COP28 because he can go there if this is not a political agenda. At a time when crises are everywhere, but leadership is not. So they're revealing to us that there's no leadership in this. That they got to put a man in place to lead the world on this climate agenda.
Right, and
it's being put in place by Britain. So we had an opinion piece at the same time. It says King Charles and the globalists at meeting in September to plot how to accelerate goals of the UN Agenda 2030 and complete their digitalization of humanity. The World Economic Forum and United Nations are so concerned that the goals of Agenda 2030 are in jeopardy of not being fulfilled by the appointed date in 2030 that they have called up for a summit in September, the SDG moment, to discuss how they can kickstart their stalled totalitarian agenda. King Charles beckons the world to follow his lead in this green new religion, as he's presented as the climate king. The globalists believe they can create their own version of heaven on earth without the God of the Bible. And this is the greatest deception they dangle in front of the unsuspecting human race. King Charles has his own website in which he outlines 10 actions we must take to drive the green recovery. And that's called the Terra Carta. And anybody can Google that and find out what it's all about. Then they have priorities of the UK. First, we must place ourselves at the center of global health agenda. So the UK is going to be at the center of this global agenda. Next, we will champion open science for global resilience. Britain is a research and science superpower, and they've teamed up with Israel on all this as well.
I was going to say, I'm wondering about that. Wow.
And then third, we will bear down on money laundering and flows of dirty money, which deprive countries of their legitimate tax receipts. So here we have the total control coming. Then it states, I am minded to publish a white paper which will outline our plans for the next 7 years, setting out a long-term direction for the British international development leadership until 2030. It will chart a course that will build on international development strategy, accelerate our determination to deliver on climate change, and galvanize international support to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. We have not a moment to lose. This was excerpts from the Minister Andrew Mitchell's speech published April 27th of 2023. And it states, today, King Charles is widely, I almost said wildly, but yeah, widely too, widely regarded as the godfather of COP. So that COP is Conference of the Parties, which began in 1992 at the Rio de Janeiro Summit, Earth Summit, where he's upon his yacht, they agreed to this movement that we're 30 some years into. His appeal to the Brazilian president at that time was passionate. We are literally the last generations, which we can save the rainforest from total destruction. So Prince Charles back then says, we are the last generation, which we as Christians believe we are the last generation. We're going to see all these things fulfilled.
Right, right. Because for us, what's exciting is that Jesus is coming back soon. So
at 30 weeks ago, there's a call to recommit to 7 years. Israel's comptroller is to roll out a climate audit ahead of COP28 and on achieving targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, forming a national preparedness plan, and establishing a national meteorological forecasting center. It's also meant to develop preparedness for Israel's security system, carrying out climate impact assessments on Israel's economy, and rolling out a carbon tax. This is for the state of Israel.
Right, which of course, they want all of us to be taxed.
Everybody's taxed to death. And then it's also meant for reporting on financial bodies, updating on the status of Israel's climate legislation, and on development of comprehensive framework for managing the climate crisis. So they'll manage how far their progress is. So here's what we're seeing this journey that we're on. It's called the Road to 2030. And the Paris Climate Agreement works on this 5-year plus 2-year stocktake plan. So it's a 7-year inclusive plan. And we're at the end of the first 7 years. And it concludes that on December 12th. And so the UN states the 2023 marks the conclusion of the first global stocktake, a 7-year process of 5 years implementation and 2 years stocktake, which assess progress on the Paris Agreement goals. This process will further encourage countries to take ambitious climate actions that keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. 2025 is the year where most systemic shifts need to be accounted for and planned for. 2030 is the deadline for net zero targets and delivering a 30 by 30 goal on biodiversity. And then on the eve of May 6th, Charles finds himself at the leading edge of the global movement to tackle climate change and carrying the expectation that he will continue driving for change from his throne ahead of COP28. So this was a statement that was made. And as the leader of the Commonwealth, he's in a key position to bring the private sector together, which he does through his SMI, to convene CEOs, which he's done, and heads of state to focus on putting the planet first and primary ahead of COP28.
Okay, and say what SMI is again.
Sustainable Markets Initiative. He has his own website for that, his own TV program as well, and it's called, I believe it's Reset TV on Amazon Prime.
We've forgotten sometimes, I think, that we are part of nature. So what we do to the world around us, we are doing totally to ourselves. We can't go on, I think, equivocating on this and just expect us to test the world ultimately to destruction before you can prove that you have destroyed it. We've got to come together as a world on this.
At 29 weeks ago, we have a statement by the UN stating the world is united for 7 years. And Al Jaber says we must unite and seize the moment. And the world is time bound. And we have 60 trillion in assets managed by the King's SMI. That's huge. So here we go once again. The SMI, these trillions of dollars are controlled by King Charles. In the Bible, we have a 7-year agreement that's coming. And we find that we see today that it's already in play, but it is to be made greater. It's a set time for 7 years, and it includes many, or the many, but Israel is part of that many. And it includes a promise for protection for Israel, which we see signed it in with a bilateral agreement on March 21st.
Okay, how is that protection?
So the protection is for climate is one of them, and also it's for their security, for Israel's security.
I see. So since they're complying.
That's military. And it expands this agreement expands the Antichrist territory, the Commonwealth, over 1/4 of the earth. And then under the Terra Carta, it was announced that there'll be a reformed global financial system under the leadership of King Charles. At 28 weeks ago, we have Pope Francis saying the pursuit of peace is closely related to the need for security. Israel is now invited to COP28, and Netanyahu and the president have agreed to go to the COP28 event. We have a Laudato Si banner. I'll mention that a little bit. Pope Francis also in 2015 began his Laudato Si movement, and he signed that in May of 2015. This was actually put into place on King Charles' birthday on November 14th.
Oh, very interesting. And I did a video about that, and so I'll show you. Yeah, there's a video that you can see more on what the Pope did with that. But I'm sorry, go on.
That began in 2022, so we're well into over a year into that deal. The first global stock take is a process for taking stock of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, which is Agenda 2030, which is the UN SDGs, the 17 goals. And this will come to an end at COP28. So it's very, very, they make this very clear. The process, which began at COP26 with Prince Charles opening the event.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how devastating a global cross-border threat can be. Climate change and biodiversity loss are no different. In fact, they pose an even greater existential threat, to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing. Having myself had the opportunity of consulting many of you over these past 18 months, I know you all carry a heavy burden on your shoulders, and you do not need me to tell you that the eyes and hopes of the world are upon you, to act with all dispatch and decisively, because time has quite literally run out.
The next 7 years begins on December 13th, 2023 to late 2030. I can tell you that the UN has a countdown clock for this, and maybe I'll bring that up a little bit later. I can give you the website for that. So there's actually a clock that's ticking down to December 30th of 2030. So we're at 27 weeks. It gets more exciting as we go on. So we're supposed to have a new deal on coal, oil, and gas to reduce coal, oil, and gas to 2030. Pope Francis, I call as the false prophet, calls for everyone to repent of our ecological sins. King Charles declares he will work with the UAE to demonstrate the road is paved with action, and that the SMI is leading the way, delivering on his mandate, the Terra Carta. So this statement alone states that he's going to strengthen this deal. Pope Francis, like I stated before, wants to end the era of fossil fuels, and that the richer nations must pay for the damages done to the poorer nations. This is the same plan as the globalists. The responsibility of ensuring a response with a clear plan of action falls on COP28 presidency, says Dr. Al J. Burr. So he's the one leading all this with King Charles, who he's collaborating with. He makes a few statements, but the number one statement is that I find significant is how to make sure that no one gets left behind. But when Jesus returns, those that left behind are the wicked. So at 26 weeks ago, says that the UN says we know the truth about climate change. Well, they also knew the truth about what happened in 2020, but not the UN, but the global leaders, and the whole world followed them. So they want you to follow their plan now. And when Prince Charles opened the event at the World Economic Forum in 2020, he made a statement that we have a decade of action ahead of us. So he was telling us we have 10 years left. And now 3 years later, we only have 7 years to go. So they've been counting down this thing for 15 years, since 2008. Prince Charles says we have 7 years to go to agree on a deal. That deal ended with the Paris Climate Agreement. And then the Bong climate change sets the stage for the course of correction towards COP28. We had that statement, and the world's religions need to join in on COP28. So here we have a one world religion being set up at COP28, and we have Abu Dhabi with the Abrahamic House and so on, just minutes away, really, from Dubai. So it's very close. So somehow this is probably going to be we're going to see this come together towards December. How it's going to play out.
Right, and then that totally plays out of Bible prophecy of a one world religion.
And then there's an interfaith pavilion for this event. During the audience, the possibility of creating an interfaith and intercultural dialogue pavilion at COP28 is being considered. So we're having this interfaith deal at this event. So then there's a statement on the Burj Khalifa. So Burj Khalifa, as it was renamed during its open ceremony, has been likened to the Tower of Babel by some. But in reality, it's a tombstone for some ruined ideas. And so we have all these ideas being presented in Dubai, and their symbol is the Burj Khalifa, the tallest tower in the world. But it'll be a symbol for sudden destruction.
Yeah, that's interesting, because then at the Commonwealth Games, which King Charles at that time was Prince Charles opened up, they had the Tower of Babel as a part of their opening show.
That one was basically to unite the Commonwealth, but they're bringing in all these nations in, and then for unity. It's a play on what happened at the Tower of Babel. In fact, I remember the reporter stating, "It's like, this is the Tower of Babel." I was like, couldn't believe, about fell out of my chair. It's like, this is they're presenting the Antichrist right in front of us, and we don't, and the world and the Christians don't see it. Obviously, the world's not going to see it, but the Christians should be able to recognize that. 25 weeks ago, we were in the month of June. The UN makes a statement that 2023 is the best chance to reset, and the LGBTQXYZ movement has to be a part of the Agenda 2030, or they will not succeed. And the SDGs are our best plan to bring about peace and the possibility to reset in 2023. So we have the Great Reset that we were presented with at the World Economic Forum in 2020, happening in 2023 at COP28.
Right, which people think that Klaus Schwab had started that, but it was really King Charles.
Yes, but Klaus Schwab did say we have a narrow window of opportunity, but we weren't told how long that window of opportunity was, but it's very apparent now. It's 3 years. At 24 weeks ago, the UN produces a time clock, time to recommit, and it's needed now. So we have that time clock on the UN website, and it's a countdown to the end of December 2030. So they want everybody's focus to be on 2030. That's the end game. That's their utopia of 2030 that comes in.
Right.
So they say. But we know it different from reading Revelation doesn't end very well for them. At 23 weeks ago, King Charles leads the way, and stating that the basic problem is people. So here we go. The problem to this agenda is us. So King Charles SMI put out a video. It's called "The 50 Years of the King's Speeches." At 23 weeks to go. The WHO appoints a special envoy for climate change and health ahead of COP28. So the WHO will be there. King Charles activated the climate countdown clock with the mayor of London, stating we had 6 years and 24 days left to go. I don't know why the 24 days, just say 6 years. At this time frame, King Charles announced the launch of the Astra Carta, a framework and ambition for the private sector to embrace the next frontier of sustainability in space. The motto is to care for infinite wonders of the universe. So King Charles is placing himself as a head of the universe. So he has his crown in the universe that he is looking over. So that was at the 23 weeks ago. So we're almost to the halfway point. Then the UK announces, or Scotland announces King Charles' second coronation. And they stated that when he went to Scotland, he got a rapturous welcome in Scotland. I can't believe they use this word. And that at the COP28 conference in Dubai, Israel is looking to take charge and be a global leader in the fight against climate change. So we see here, along with the UK, that both the UK and Israel will take charge. Israel planned to participate in around 70 events at COP28. Almost every day of COP28 is themed, including the first 2 days, known as the World Climate Action Summit. And Benjamin Netanyahu and President Herzog will participate. So they're participating in nearly every event at COP28. So Israel's playing a huge role in this, which is key because the Bible says that the Antichrist, will break that covenant, the midpoint of the tribulation. So we see this covenant being formed today since March 21st between the UK and Israel.
Right, right. So this is the connection, and then and how do you think he'll break it?
It's a money making based way to break it. So he breaks ties that Israel can't make any more money. That's one aspect of it, which is pretty clear to date.
Very interesting.
So and then it says we only have the ambassador to this Ambassador Gideon Behar says we only have a short time to deal with the climate crisis, and he's part of the special envoy for the climate change and sustainability at the Foreign Ministry of Israel. So the world is looking to Israel to come up with solutions. We are on the international and historic mission. So Israel wants to lead the way at this event. Then also another heading that I found pretty interesting is UAE President and Bill Gates discuss COP28 and climate change. So you can bet, I already know for a fact Bill Gates will be at this event. At 21 weeks ago, Israel has just sent their largest delegation ever and pass climate law. So Israel is intended to pass a climate law at this event. A census report will be delivered at the UN General Assembly. Happens in September to build upon a roadmap for the next 7 years, 5 years of implementation and 2 years stock take beginning in 2028. 20 weeks to go, we have possibilities or some talk of the 18th goal that's going to be presented at possibly in September.
Now, why would Israel then want to be involved in all of this when there's the possibility of this 18th SDG goal of dividing the land?
In one word, it would be greed. It's about making money.
That makes sense. And also, I know that there's been like some evil leaders in Israel who really didn't care if the land would be divided. So it's not like all of them are for Israel having all of their land.
Yeah. So in September, Mr. Guterres wants clear plans and pledges to strengthen action in their countries to 2030. So we're going to see the pledges and actions happen in September, but the confirming of the covenant is going to be is planned for December. So we've passed the halfway marker to COP28. We just have weeks to go, and obviously we've seen that they're pushing the 7-year deal. We have 7 years to save the earth, and their statement is as of last week, or their statement is of now. The bad news is we have lost 7 years since 2016, but the good news is we still have 7 years.
Right, and 7 years for them to push harder than ever before their agenda.
And that's where we're at.
Yeah. Now,
major push for the next 7 years.
Right. And so you're going to be having updates every week. I mean, we're going to do another update video, but we're not going to do it every single week. But on your Facebook page, they can find the updates, and we say the Facebook pages again. And can they find those updates then on the YouTube channel?
They will be on the YouTube channel. Right now, I've got to upload a few more videos, and then when we get close to this, when the countdown gets to like 15 weeks or 10 weeks, I'm going to do weekly updates.
Okay. Okay, great. So why don't you give your Facebook pages again so people could read the updates? And
they can follow me on my Facebook. I can't take any more friends, but they can follow me, and it's Craig Bong. I'm on Facebook, and then Rapture Watchers, all caps, or the Signs of the End - Rapture Watchers.
Okay, wow, Craig, thank you so much for giving us all these updates. And everyone has to stay tuned to more of what's going on by following Craig. And we're going to have more update videos and watch what's going on in September with the UN meeting and watch what's going on with COP28 in December. Thank you so much.